What's up everybody, hope all is well. In part 2 of my series on Overwatch lore, we'll cover 2 animated shorts, Alive and Recall, 1 comic, Reflections, and 2 origin stories, Tracers and King's Row. Perhaps most importantly, we'll get into Overwatch vs Talon, which in my opinion is most interesting and one of 2 core pillars to the Overwatch story. Last video, we barely scratched the surface. We met 2 heroes, Bastion and Torbjorn, 3 if you want to count Ganymede. Details from the source material were scant. We learned of a great war between man and machine that appears to have ended, though tenuously, with mankind victorious. At this point, real quick, I'd like to revisit the timeline of events and quickly cover some important points to A, make sure we're on the same page, and B, provide context for what we're about to see. So here we go. The game we all exist and play in is believed to take place around 2075. The original Omnic War occurred around 2045. The game's opening cinematic, where Winston says 30 years ago the Omnics declared war, is that war. As far as I can tell, Blizz is intentionally vague on the date. Even artwork in the game denotes years as 20XX. The community has pieced together a rough timeline though. As an example, if we're to believe 2075-ish is present day, then consider this. In Soldier 76's origin story, where we learn of his fake death, it says that happened 6 years ago. That puts us in 2069. It also says he led Overwatch for 20 years. That puts us in 2049. Turn to another piece of content, Fated Glory, which states he was promoted to Overwatch leader after the Omnic War, and we can do the math. It appears that while intense, the Omnic War was brief, just a few years. Compound all that ambiguity with the fact time in Overwatch is moving with us, and yeah, it's a deep rabbit hole. So why did I take time to explain all that? Well, all the animated shorts take place in the current time and occur in relatively quick succession. Some say less than a year, but at most, just a few. Comics, short stories, and origin stories serve mainly to fill out the past. The 2 animated shorts we'll talk about today, Alive and Recall, are really the start to our current timeline. They're the first shots, so to speak. There's some debate about which of the 2 occurred first chronologically, but I'm firmly in the Alive camp for good reason, which I'll provide shortly. So we'll check out Alive first, then Tracer's origin story, then King's Row origin story, then Recall, and finally Reflections. Sound good? With all that out of the way, let's get into it and start with everyone's favorite Lady Assassin. Alive has a few important things to discuss. First, it sets up good versus evil, and second, it shows what started the current conflict. By proxy, we'll check out Tracer's origin story just to see how she got her abilities, as well as King's Row origin story just to see how it even came to be and why it's so special. I assume everyone's seen the animated short by now. If not, I highly encourage you to check it out. Links in the description below. It's one of my favorites and pretty emotional actually. Alive introduces us to Widowmaker, a Talon operative. Her backstory is tragic and dark. In game, we all know her as a cold, calculating assassin, but prior to becoming Widowmaker, she was Amelie Guillard, a normal person. She was from an important family, living a privileged life, a successful ballet dancer in Paris, and married to a top Overwatch agent, Gerard Lacroix. His story is an important one we'll cover in a future video, but she was kidnapped by Talon and subjected to neural conditioning that transformed her from Amelie to Widowmaker, a stone-cold killer. Ultimately, she killed her husband Gerard in his sleep and now works for Talon, the bad guys. She also shot my favorite hero, Anna, right in the face, but we'll get to that in another video. In Alive, she assassinates Tekhartha Mondatta. It set off events that we're living through today in current Overwatch. So who's Tekhartha Mondatta and why is he important? Well, years ago he was among the first Omnics to become sentient. They recused themselves from society and retreated to temples high up in the mountains to focus on their existence and spirituality. He was their leader, a Dalai Lama of sorts. So important was he that the statue in King's Row was erected in his honor. By the way, we got steamrolled first point here just so I could take this pic for you guys for the video. Anyways, transferring this context to the real world, you see how it would be capable of inciting conflict. So a nice little major plot point in my opinion. We also see Tracer for the first time. Her real name is Lena Oxton, born and raised in London. She was a pilot for the Air Force until an unfortunate mishap during a test flight nearly killed her. What happened between then and now is something we'll talk about shortly in her origin story, but of critical import is taking note to how her chronal harness was damaged towards the end, because it's important as evidence for why Alive comes before Recall. I wanted to include Tracer's origin story since we were introduced to her in Alive, and it helps fill out the story a bit more. In it, we learned she was a pilot. She volunteered to test an experimental jet for Overwatch called the Slipstream. It had a piece of technology called the teleportation matrix that malfunctioned, causing the entire jet and Tracer to vanish. She wasn't killed, rather she had something called chronal disassociation that caused her to fade in and out of existence. Our favorite monkey scientist, Winston, created the chronal harness that keeps Tracer in the present. She learned to leverage her ability to phase in and out of existence and control her own time. Her newfound superpowers were a perfect fit for Overwatch, and thus her career as an agent began. Don't laugh at me, but until I saw this, I didn't know Tracer had legit superpower abilities. I always thought it was 100% just that device Winston made for her hanging around her neck. Pretty cool. I also included the Kings Row origin story because it was the location for Alive and because it's everyone's favorite map. Also, only about a minute long, it's worth checking out. Links below. It takes place 20 years after the first Omnic War. Kings Row, as we know it in-game, was redesigned as a home for the peaceful Omnics after the first Omnic crisis, but an Omnic extremist group attacked and Overwatch was sent in to clean up. Tracer included on her first mission. By the way, the blue uniforms help denote an earlier time for Overwatch before they disbanded. Curious what uniforms we'll get for Overwatch 2 when they reform. That's it for those two origin stories. Like I said, I included them just to help provide some extra context. Recall tells us two stories. The first is the moment Winston presses the recall button, and the second shares a little on how a hyper-intelligent monkey even came to be. Perhaps most critically, we learn why Overwatch disbanded. Early in the short, we see Winston tempted to recall Overwatch, but Athena, his AI, tells us why he shouldn't. It's a major plot point for the universe and one that's about to create some serious drama come Overwatch 2.
Every time you see news of this sort, we go through this. I remind you, recalling Overwatch agents to active duty comes with great risk. The Petrus Act clearly states any Overwatch activity is deemed illegal and punishable by prosecution.
I know. You're right.
Recall introduces us to Winston. We learn a little bit about how a hyper-intelligent monkey can come to be, though no specific details are provided. I assume some sort of genetic experimentation, and while his caretaker seems kind and caring, the Wrecking Ball origin video suggests something more sinister. It also shows us the moment Winston hits the recall button. The remaining cinematics, up to and including 0 Hour, are what happens after doing this. We see Talon Operative Reaper infiltrate the base to steal the Overwatch agent list, though ultimately unsuccessful. Reaper's backstory is rich, but I think is best reserved for a more in-depth look at Overwatch, Blackwatch, and Talon. Reaper was a central figure, having been commander of Blackwatch, the secret ops wing of Overwatch that went on to do some morally questionable things. If you take this video to be very close in time to Alive, it paints the picture of a coordinated effort by the Talon org to start something big. Almost simultaneously, Widowmaker assassinates Mondatta and Reaper tries to steal the Overwatch agent list. What are they up to? I guess Overwatch 2 will tell. Now that we've seen both videos, why do I think Alive comes first? Simple. Because of this.
You do this?
Adieu, chérie.
Establishing agent connections.
Winston? Is that you, love? It's been too long!
Yes. Yes, it has.
That's it. Totally meaningless in the big picture, but I like how it connects the dots and thought worth sharing. I tell you more about the comic, but that's it. It's a full run and I'm planning to make a video on it in the future. The comic Reflections offers no real story value. There's one juicy piece of lore, but it's essentially just a feel-good story. We're finally getting into the heroes and it focuses on Tracer. I figured why not, may as well include it. It also gives me a chance to practice some new ways of displaying comics, so here we go. Like I said, Reflections is just a feel-good holiday story. Tracer's rushing around trying to get a last-minute Christmas gift before stores close, but Tracer being Tracer, she puts that on hold to stop a mugging. She gets that out of the way and arrives at the store just as it closes, but rushes off to another. Eyeing a scarf, she snags it just as someone else is, and again, Tracer being Tracer, kindly offers it over. Store closes, Tracer's out of luck. Fortunately, on the way home, she bumps into the same family she helped earlier, and they present her with a thank you gift. Back at her apartment with her girlfriend Amelie, seemingly forgotten about the gift, she sees Amelie reach for it. Check out the look on Tracer's face, I think we've all been there. Turns out it's a scarf like Tracer was trying to get. Amelie loves it. The rest of the comic is spent showing how many of the Overwatch heroes spent that holiday, each true to character. Winston's in his lab. We see Zenyatta, Genji, Pharah, Torbjorn, Junkrat, Roadhog, and Hanzo, Reinhardt, Anna and Soldier 76, we have tons of info coming up about them. I love Reaper creeping in the background here, Cassidy, Sombra, Widowmaker, and Mercy. Note, Widow standing at the grave of her husband she assassinated, Gerard Lacroix. And a nice surprise at the end, Tracer and Amelie show up to spend Christmas with Winston. And with that, I'm done. Appreciate you taking the time. Take care of one another, and I will see you soon.